So, I'm here with the guy who developed most of the asymmetrical variants showcased on PyChess.org. And I just want to ask you some questions about this game. I don't think this one will take too long. It's pretty simple, and we covered most of it in the Orta video. But why did you make Empire Chess?
Sure. So I think it was a pretty natural next step after Orda,
Mm-hmm.
because Orda chess was very uh, successful, and so like obviously you had this army that is focused on having all the pieces kind of sharing a similar movement, but still maintaining the classic attack patterns that you find in chess. So if you could do it with a knight, can you do it with anything else? And I guess it wasn't like I guess the engine wasn't able to handle anything else until we were able to develop custom pieces. And when that happened, the natural next step was probably a queen-shaped or queen-shaped move, because a bishop would obviously would be terrible,
Yeah.
and a rook seemed kind of weak. And it ended up being that a queen movement was just enough to be pretty balanced. So I did that, and I was even able to get the queen piece to kind of use king attack. That became the duke, and everything else just kind of fell into place pretty
Mm-hmm.
nicely, um, with the exception of the pawns. So the pawns, I kind of went back and forth between second rank, third rank, and even with them being on the third rank, it was still not strong enough at that point, and I had to add in two more pieces, which were the soldiers, and this filled in the middle two pieces and kind of act like imperial bodyguards. So that was how that came about.
Well, there's a few other thoughts I have, but the fact that it's at least close if you give a rook capturing piece, a knight capturing piece, and a bishop capturing piece, queen movements instead of their normal one, and then replace the queen with a duke, is actually kind of remarkable because if we go with the classic tested amounts, a king capture is only worth about 2 pawns, and a queen capture is worth about 6. So you only removed about 5 points of material from like the classic estimations that are close to Ralph Bates's, and yet adding all of this extra movement, which again classically you're adding like a pawn here, a pawn here, a pawn here, um, 2 pawns in the case of, honestly it's 3 pawns for the, yeah, you're adding about 2 pawns and then 1 pawn to all of these if you're looking at classical eval, but it doesn't quite work like that because that would mean that you're down like a bishop at the start. But it turns out the movement requires action economy, so utilizing a whole lot of movement doesn't really work all that well. Plus, you have less total attack power than the chess army after that. So, material isn't everything.
It really isn't, and it there's so much to go that goes behind balancing a game that's why it's just helpful to use an engine because it does all of that for you. Because all I care about is the end result, how many wins one side has versus the other side, and between stuff like material, starting position, and anything else that goes in between. I mean, that just goes into the machine and pops out an answer.
Mm-hmm. Empire Chess is actually one of three games that currently are playable with that engine that I would be a little bit more hesitant to fully trust the eval on from that initial test without some NNUE, personally. But it appears to be working really well. But maybe I should explain why I feel that way. So, when you have this number of legal moves that's present in Empire and also in Shinobi and Shogi, or something like Shogun's chess, it makes it harder for the engine to get good data um, with whatever level of play it's at. It's still going to be stronger than most humans, and therefore is still at least somewhat valid. But I would expect um, the noted balance to shift once NNUE is added to that play. Did that happen?
I don't recall what the balance was. I just recall that Orda was pretty good still after NUE.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that said, if it does shift somewhat, it's still okay to me because I mean we're talking about superhuman playing strength that
Mm-hmm.
really doesn't affect any of us. So just because at an extremely high level, one side is stronger than another, doesn't necessarily mean it's imbalanced. But what
It
I tested was at different time controls, and it stayed pretty consistent throughout all those. So I think that's a pretty good metric, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Why did you implement the Shang-Chi inspired rules for the king facing and the two Shang-Chi soldiers sitting in the middle of this board?
I think it was a convergence of two different things. One was the theme, which came later. Uh, Actually, for most of my games, I never came up with the theme first. It just kind of like, oh, what kind of matches this pattern?
Mm-hmm.
So the theme of an empire, well, specifically the Holy Roman Empire, kind of was like, well, this army is very similar to the standard chess army. Um, and the fact that the base piece is now more like the queen, so I was thinking of some kind of royal theme, whereas when the base piece was a knight, I was thinking of some kind of horse theme, right? Um, so obviously, like in Order Chess, I call it the original army, um, I call it the kingdom, because it's just like a generic European kingdom. But now I need something that's very European-like, but not quite a kingdom. And so you have all these pieces that have like these super powered moves, and then it just came pretty quickly, like, oh, like something like an empire. And so I went with the Holy Roman Empire. I I don't know why I didn't choose the like a Byzantine Empire theme. I think part of me in the back of my head wanted a separate Byzantine army, which I did end up making. So um, and I think it was just because they were so close to each other that the HRE was basically just like that. So because now we're talking about an empire theme, I'm starting to think about like other empires, and then you have the Chinese Empire. Um, and what game does the Chinese Empire have? It has Shang-Chi. So
Mm.
now I'm starting to borrow things that are like imperial in nature. So the King Face Off was one of those things, and when I thought of that, it made a lot of sense. Like one, I wanted to play around with different rules that you can turn on and off on Fairy Stockfish,
Mm-hmm.
but also at the same time, like that imperial presence, or like, yo, I'm the Holy Roman Emperor. It kind of fit the game very well, and I think for the theme purpose, but also for the purposes of gameplay, it added something new, right? Like now you can't have the two, you can't have the king and the Kaiser face each other. So I might as well just throw it in, right? And there's can't mate from Orda as well. And these kind of things just kind of like you have the asymmetric army, but then you also have these new rules that just add different flavors to it. And it's kind of like my little play box, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And Can't Mate, I think, is much less controversial in Empire than Orda. Partly because I think the possible elegant mates from the new pieces included in Empire that would be contradicted by Campmate is much fewer in number. Because the baseline piece level is so high and they're so maneuverable, it's just easier versions of existing mates for the most part.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean they're very similar to their chess equivalent, so it's like nothing lost
mm-hmm.
by having can't mate. And plus also the other part is the king face off rule, which makes can't mate harder because once you have
It does.
a very empty board, you can't just pass the other one. You have to have another piece blocking.
Which adds another layer of intrigue to me. Um, from the things I've found, that rule creates more dynamic and interesting cases because King Face Off is involved. and having that in the game, just, how do I say, those two rules complement each other really well for creating strategic depth. And I think that was more of a discovery than an intention from you.
I mean, the moment I turned on the King Face-Off rule, that was like one of the first things I thought of. Like, oh, that'll actually work pretty well with Can't Mate. So, I mean, I guess it was a discovery, but it was a very, very quick discovery that I didn't even need to play games to kind of figure out.
Fair enough.
I think there was something. Oh yes, the other thing that kind of tied it together was since I used the soldier was a base, not a really a base, but it's still featured in Shang-Chi.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured like, oh, I already have one element from that game. I might as well kind of use another.
Yeah, and Sino Chess was, kind of on your mind at the time as well.
Undermined.
On your mind.
Oh, on my mind, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry if my ability to speak is a bit impaired.
That's all good. I actually don't even. I thought Sino Chess came first.
I think it did. You were just struggling with getting it to a state that you would be happy with at the time, if memory serves discussion well.
Yeah, it was a while ago now, so I don't remember the exact details.
Mm-hmm. I believe Sinochess is the one we're going to talk about next, though. But I don't really have anything else to add here. I quite enjoy Empire Chess. And I suppose I should. Initially, when we were talking about which of your games to potentially include in Titans Battalion, because having someone come along that just had 5 or 6 engine balanced games at the time, because Shinobi came out after you found out about TB. Initially, I was just like, oh, we could include all of these. And then I was like, hold up. Let's actually look at the rules. And this and Orda both had, they didn't mess with the enemy's promotion. So they legitimately, what they were balanced against matched the army that we included and called Medieval in Titans Battalion. Versus the other ones, which mess with promotion a bit more. And then we didn't include Sino Chess, even though it also had that, because it was too close to the actual Shang-Chi army, which we were trying to include properly.
It was close, but the final product is still different. It's more inspired, is what I would say.
And also, we'll talk more about Sino Chess when that comes. I don't have anything else to add beyond that. It has turned into one of my favorite games, but it took a while to get there for me. Like, the idea of it didn't inspire me initially, like some of the other games I've seen. But it feels good. It feels really good.
It's my personal impression of it is it's hard. It's a lot hard. It's harder and more stressful than Orda chess
Mm-hmm.
because of the sheer number of moves you have available to you. So when you're playing as the Empire, you have to think of all these moves. But then when you're playing as the Kingdom, you also have to think of what those opponents' moves. So it just adds a lot more complexity for both sides. So it's it's very tricky. It's a very tricky game.
Man, I was even beating Fairy Stockfish level 1 for most of the little bits that I was actually playing, but I just blundered my queen. All right, we'll cut the video there.
Sounds good.